Welcome to Brand Builders TV. Deep dive topics, tools and resources brought to you by global thought leaders from within the Brand Builders Club. This show gives you access to the strategies that you can use to move forward with ease and flow in every area of your life and business. In today's show, Mary digs deep into how leading others means leading yourself first. Learn it, model it, and get shit done. Let's go.
Good morning. Good morning, Brand Builders. And welcome to Brand Builders TV. It is Friday, the 23rd of October, 10 a.m. And that means that it's time for program 2 in my series of how to get over yourself and be a really fantastic future fit leader that you were born to be. And today in program 2, what we're going to be looking at is how to focus on leading yourself first. So last week we looked at what ego is, how ego is there, it's our survival strategy, but also how it can get in our own way. And we explored some of the ego traps that we can catch ourselves in, our kind of own psychic prison in terms of catching ourselves in our own ego traps. So today, what we are going to focus on in thinking about leading yourself first is we're going to look at why that's important and who you are as a leader and where you are showing up in your life as a leader. We're also going to consider the impact you have on other people and how other people are showing up around you, because that's a reflection of how you are showing up as a leader too. And we're going to look at the challenges and the dilemmas that leaders face today, because there are many things that challenge us today and can cause us not necessarily to lead as we might want to lead and to show up in the world as we might want to show up in the world, because there's so many triggers that can cause our ego to get activated in those elements of ourselves that aren't necessarily going to be as helpful as we'd like them to be. So that's what we're going to look at in the first half of today. And then we're going to move on to talking a bit more about relational leadership. And I'll be sharing with you my sort of point of view about my thinking around that leadership is actually all about relationship. If you want people to come with you, then you need to be able to have the relationship skills and be able to build really good, strong, connected relationships with people. But what often gets neglected is in building those relationships, we need to establish a positive relationship with ourselves first. So that's what we're going to be covering. And then we're going to do some takeaways at the end in terms of some questions for you to reflect on, like us to be on an ongoing journey together and thinking about the elements of different of leadership and who we are as leaders. So I'm always going to leave you at the end with some questions to reflect on until we meet next time. So we are on StreamYard, so if anyone is watching, if you'd like to make a comment or have a question, please do post them up. It'd be great to see your comments and observations. However, it'd be also good if you could put your name in first, because on StreamYard, when you're on Facebook on StreamYard, it doesn't necessarily show your name. So let's just think about you as a leader. And I think the first thing I would like to consider, or I'd like us to consider, is how conscious are you of yourself as a leader? So I work with leaders in the organizational field. I work with corporate leaders, people that are running huge businesses, but I also work with small business owners as well. So people who are starting up their businesses too. But either way, they're in a definite position where they are leading others and they need others to come with them. But I actually take a bigger view of leadership, and it's not just about you being a recognized, named leader in the corporate world. I actually believe that we're all leaders, and we all are in situations where we'll be leading more often than in other situations. So when I'm saying to you, how conscious are you of being a leader and where you are showing up as a leader, what I'm thinking about is leadership is all about influence. So wherever you have some influence in the world, you are being a leader. So I'd like you to consider, therefore, where, who, and how are you being a leader? So Are you a parent? Are you, are you a member of your family? Do you contribute to your family? What's your community like with your friends? Where do you have a business or a team that you might be leading? What are the different situations where you will be leading in your life, be it at work, be it at home, be it at play, wherever it might be? Either way, it's where you're influencing and where you're making a difference. And the final point to raise there is not just about you leading other people, but how are you leading yourself? You're a leader in your own life. To what degree are you seeing yourself as that? And are you seeing yourself as someone who's creating their life? Or do you feel that there are times that you are at the cause of your life? So you kind of just rock up and go along with, as opposed to actually stepping up and leading and causing things for yourself in your life. And actually, on that last point, I'd just like to raise that you might not think you are a leader in your life, but actually your life still keeps showing up around you. And certainly in my experience, my own personal journey, and in working with leaders in organizations and in their own businesses, the more we become aware that how we show up has an impact on what shows up around us, the more influence and choice we have around our own circumstances and the situations we're in. So if you're in the position of maybe being you might be caught up in an ego trap, which might be around rescue me. That was a one that I certainly used to get caught up with a lot and still can. Or blaming others. If you're in either of those ego traps, you may not necessarily be making the choices to step up and lead in your life. And in fact, you are making a choice. You're making a choice to be given by that ego trap. And it's about how can you get out of that in order to then choose something different. Leadership is all about the choices that we make. That's how we show up. We have circumstances that come to us the whole way through our lives. All of us do. And some of those and many of those will be challenging. But it's about how you make the choices. What choice do you make to respond? And that's what leadership is. It's making a conscious choice to respond and then to influence those circumstances or influence those other people around us. So we show up all over the place in our lives as leaders. And that's what I'm interested in. And I'm interested in future fit leaders, which is people who are willing to look at themselves and understand themselves so they can understand how to deal with whatever challenging circumstances they are faced with, which in today's environment and today's fast-paced, fast-changing, unpredictable world, we need to do so much of. So my next question then is, how do people show up around you? Just have a think about that. And you may find that in different communities that you're a part of, they'll show up differently. So people will show up differently and relate to you differently, for example, in your work environment compared to your family and your friends' environment. But how do they show up? It's worth having a think about how people show up. What's great about how they show up? And also, where might there be some concerns that you have? So I'll share with you my story, which is, within the context of my work, I come across some amazing people. The people I'm working with as a coach, phenomenal leaders. It's a real honor and privilege to work with them. And they show up as really insightful, motivated individuals, full of potential, who want to make a difference in the world. In my family, I show up for those people in a certain way that helps create that. In my family, I show up differently. And I think we might all have that. I show up much more about the real me. So when I'm annoyed, I'll let that show quite visibly. If I'm sad, I'll be very honest and open about sharing that. Because with those people in my family, I have a much more honest, open, authentic relationship. And I don't mean I'm not dishonest and inauthentic with my clients. It's a different context. So the context of my family is different. And how my family show up is going to be different to how my clients show up. But what the point I'm trying to get across is that how people show up is a reflection of how we're being. So I'm thinking recently, I've been making a much more concerted effort in my family to be loving and to be playful. So I'm guilty of, when my ego gets activated, I can be very self-critical, and that then manifests as me being critical of others. And that particularly shows up in my family. And so I've been making not an effort, I've been holding an intention around, I want to be more loving and more playful. And I've noticed a real shift in my relationship with my daughter, for example, which has become much more loving, much more affectionate, and much more fun. So I would invite you to think about, how do the people in your life and in your work show up around you? And what does that say about how you're being? And what intention might you want to set yourself to make a shift? So if there's anything that you're seeing there that isn't necessarily what you want to see or that you think could be better, consider what shift you might want to make for yourself, particularly in your being, and set an intention for, this is how I'm going to be with the people in this particular environment. And I know to do that, it will take something to look inside yourself. And I'm introducing this as a concept that actually leadership is from the inside out. It's not from the outside in. And that's where our development starts as a leader. It is from understanding ourselves better and leading from that inside place. So understanding our emotions, how we're feeling, what might be triggering us at any given time. What are our values? What's important to us in terms of how we live our lives? And what's our purpose? Why are we here? What's important to us from a values point of view? And what does that say about the difference we want to make in the world? And when we get clearer of those things, that helps us be a leader who can transcend our ego and our ego reactions and drives, and really make that big difference and create a legacy in the world that we might not otherwise have been able to. So the work starts inside. And yet, that's when I want to introduce the whole idea of the dilemma, because there is a dilemma for leaders. And the dilemma is that although it's absolutely key and has been consistently identified as the way to grow is from the inside out, we as a world and as a society have so much focus on the outside. And there is so much going on the outside, with social media, with all the communications, the amount of emails people get sent, the amount of noise that's going on externally. My observation is that is only increasing. It's getting noisier and noisier and noisier. And in fact, that was one of the positives that came out of the lockdown that we had, was it caused us to sit back and to reflect and to have some quiet. So the dilemma is that we're dealing with all this external noise and it's increasing, and we don't necessarily have enough time or commitment to give ourselves that quiet time, that time to reflect, to ponder on ourselves, to learn from our experiences and work on ourselves from the inside out. And in this very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that we live in at the moment, there is such a need for us to keep having that time to reflect. Looking at ourselves from the inside out, when we lead from the inside out, it does take a certain degree of commitment. And it is a choice. Now, we've already mentioned choice right at the beginning, that if you find yourself in an ego trap, it is about, can I choose something different to get myself out of this ego trap? Can I choose an alternative way to respond to this situation? Yeah. All of that is around choice. So thinking about that, consider the choices you can make, and you can choose to set some time aside and have some quiet time on a daily basis, if possible, to reflect or to meditate or to practice mindfulness, just to help yourself as a leader become more aware of yourself, who you are, what's impacting you, and also setting an intention for the change you want to make or for the difference you want to make in the world and in the relationships you have with others. And that brings us to the whole notion of relationship. Because I said at the beginning that I believe leadership is about relationship. And I believe very much in relational leadership. That's what I talk about in my book. It's very hard to be a leader in whatever context we're leading, be it our family, be it our work, be it leading a whole country. It's very difficult to have that be effective if we're not relating to people and we're not building positive relationships. But here's the thing. Those positive relationships start with the relationship we have with ourselves. So here is another question for us to ponder. How is the relationship that you have with yourself? How is that going? How much are you your own best friend or your own worst enemy? And if you're like me, as I've gone through life, I've spent a lot of time thinking about relationships, and the relationships I've got into, I've at times been guilty of analyzing to death about, why is this relationship working or not working? And I'm looking at the other person, I'm looking at the relationship, and actually the person to return to is to myself. And how am I being, and what is my relationship like with myself, in order for me to understand, why is my relationship with this particular person showing up as it's showing up? So I'm curious, are you a friend or a foe to yourself? How much do you encourage yourself? How much do you validate the strengths that you hold? How aware are you of your own strengths? And how comfortable are you in your own skin? Because there's something about, if you're a leader who really wants to cause and make a difference in the world, which is what I believe future fit leaders are all about, there's an element of needing to feel comfortable in our own skins in order to take a stand for the things that we believe in. So I believe very strongly in creating organizations where people can thrive. And from my perspective, how a leader shows up absolutely contributes to that being the case or not the case. I feel strong enough to stand up and say that. There are times in my life where I haven't felt strong enough to stand up and say that, where I felt like I would just withdraw or quietly nod in agreement to something that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, because I haven't been comfortable enough in my own skin to stand up and say it. And there are probably still situations where I might not always be as comfortable as I would like to be. It's an ongoing journey. But I'm just inviting you to think about, how can you become more of a best friend to yourself, and to acknowledge your strengths, and to be comfortable with yourself, both the things that you're great at, but also, our own shortcomings. We've all got our own shortcomings, which kind of comes into the area of being willing to be vulnerable. And part of the way that we build relationship as a leader, or not just as a leader, I think we're leaders everywhere. Part of the way we build relationships is by being vulnerable and sharing our vulnerabilities. And that's what causes a stronger connection. That's what creates a greater intimacy. So keep consciously building your relationship with yourself. And you can do that through some of the methods I've mentioned already, getting more aware of your emotions, getting more aware of your values, meditating, being comfortable with who you are, quietening that critical voice, which we will look at later in the series as well. But really developing that sense of being your own best friend. So here are some reflections to summarize what we've been covering today. Here are some reflections I'd like you to take away and give yourself some time to reflect this week. And if you can do that on a daily basis, that'd be fantastic. It doesn't have to be, don't think it's an hours long commitment. You could put 10 minutes in a day, 5 minutes in a day to reflect. And what I'd like you to reflect on is notice over the coming week, how are you relating to yourself? How kind are you being? Or how critical are you being? Quite often we can be our own worst enemies, and we might criticize others, but we're actually criticizing ourselves the most. So how critical are you being? Just notice. Don't make judgments on it. Just notice. How often do you put yourself down? And how often do you affirm yourself and acknowledge, God, I did well there, and actually do a little celebration of your successes? And then, having noticed those things, how does this affect your feelings and your behavior? The way we relate to ourselves absolutely affects our feelings and behavior. And I'll give an example. I have an ongoing struggle with my eating habits and with my weight. It has been with me since I was a chubby child. And I do know that when my eating is really out of control, I am not feeling great about myself. And I think it's the not feeling great about myself or feeling anxious and unhappy about something that then results in me overeating. And I also know that when my diet goes out the window, that's a sign I'm starting to get stressed as well. So all of these things are interlinked. So what is the impact of the way you relate to yourself on your feelings and on your behavior? And then beyond that, if that is how your feelings and behavior are affected by the way you're relating to yourself, how is that then impacting on your relationships with others? So 3 things to think about. Notice how you relate to yourself, and you'll be relating to yourself in different ways at different times. Impact on your feelings and your behaviors, and how does that then affect the relationships you build with others? I hope that you've enjoyed this session today, and I look forward to seeing you next week at 10 o'clock, next Friday, the 30th, I believe it is, of October, where we'll be looking at building further levels of consciousness. Because having got a sense of it's about the relationship you have with yourself, where to start, we also need to start building further levels of consciousness. I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
I hope that you've enjoyed the show today as much as we've enjoyed making it for you. If you've got anything out of this episode, please do tell someone else how they can subscribe to the Brand Builders TV channel at youtube.com/brandbuilderstv. Why not join us at our next Brand Builders Thinkubator, a global mastermind that we run every week to take away the loneliness of being in business on your own. For more information and to book your place, visit light.brandbuilders.club/Thinkubator. That's light.brandbuilders.club/Thinkubator. Until next time, be the ripple that you wish to see in the world, and we'll see you soon.